Okay, Mr. Afayan or Professor Afayan, or if I may say Nubар, because we know each other for many, many years, and we know each other as friends. I'm happy that we're having this discussion, but I'm also sorry that you couldn't make and coming to Dilijan to be present personally at the third Armenian Summit of Minds. But I hope that you'll be able to come next year, the one that we are doing in September, together with the Starmuz, so a big festival of science, technology, astronomy, music, and I'm looking forward to have you as one of our main speakers. So in the meantime, I represent the audience that is at the Summit of Minds. I would like very much to hear from you your opinion on several subjects, and one of them is the role of innovation. I think there is a simple answer to that. I think one could answer it's great, but the times have changed. If in the history of science technology we had industrial revolutions, then for a long period of time people were getting the benefits of those revolutions. The way I see it now, and if you agree with me, the revolution is happening sort of every day. It's not just one fourth or fifth industrial revolution, and we'll have a long period of time just getting the results of the fruits of this revolution. But the core of all of this is innovation. And I would like to hear from you how this innovation have been transforming the world, and how the innovation itself has been transformed itself. Because innovation today, innovation even 10 years ago or 20 years ago are different. Please, Nubar.
Well, first of all, thank you, Mr. President, for inviting me. I am sorry I'm not there in person, and I hope that with adequate planning next year I can be there in person, because I like to be in Dilijan, I like to be in Armenia, and I like to share thoughts with colleagues. So all of the things that you're doing today is quite relevant to my sphere. As to your observations about innovation and its role, I mean, certainly with the basic definition of innovation being kind of an improvement of a process or a thing that has some usefulness to somebody who consumes it, it's been around for a long time. And it's kind of the underlying driver of progress. You can have innovative thoughts, you can have innovative business models, you can have innovative technologies. And I'd say that it's part of the human condition that we innovate, we improve. But I think that more and more, as you said, innovation has become a commodity, because there's a baseline level of innovation that we expect that happens. And it happens from everywhere and anywhere. And it's less a source of advantage, and it's less something that kind of people are marveling about. And what is now changing is that what we really need against this baseline of innovation are breakthrough innovations, things that truly change the arc of possibility in a particular area, and those are by their very nature seemingly unpredictable and kind of random. And I one of the things that we've learned in our experience, and I think others are beginning to figure out, is that it doesn't have to be. Because if you're really trying to think about breakthrough innovations, you really need to think future backwards, not present forward. And let me explain what I mean. Innovation, I would contend, basically happens almost exclusively in adjacencies. So if you draw a circle around what is known or what is existing in an area, and then inside the circle, let's say, is everything that's known and already has been made, then just outside that circle is a zone in every which direction that could represent the next thing in that particular field. Now, new knowledge, new technologies, new products. And it is that zone right next to what already is known that investments are made, whether that's in academia, whether that's in industry or venture capital. And the way that occurs, and this is really pervasive, is that the people who make the investments ask experts in that field, what they think about what's being proposed. And of course, these experts know a lot about what already exists, a little bit about what could exist, and exactly nothing about whatever is going to exist 10, 20 years from now. And so those experts basically create a bias towards things that are adjacent, because that's their area of expertise. That's where money goes. That's a safer bet for the incumbents to make. If you're a Nobel Prize winning scientist, you're going to want to continue to cultivate the area that you've created. Or if you're a Google or Amazon, you're going to want to expand your sphere of dominance. And so that's just to think about, that's the area of adjacency. Now the question is, can you innovate beyond adjacencies, and how? And for that, you need to really just escape that kind of gravity, that dogmatic thinking that the only thing worth working on is something that other people can tell you is a good idea. And how do you do that? And we've spent in my own company quite 21 years basically trying to do that. And we think that can be done systematically to produce breakthrough after breakthrough. Not that all these breakthroughs become commercially successful, because there's a lot of execution, there's a lot of kind of changes of supply chains that have to happen for some breakthroughs to work. But the ability to generate seemingly unobvious things that look like they're big leaps from adjacencies, that I think is just a question of mindset and approach. And it's working backwards from what should exist to make it real versus what could exist from what is already real.
And what about the COVID? Had the COVID, well, when we say COVID, a lot of us think about you as well. Because it's Moderna, because it's a vaccination. But speaking about COVID, has COVID exercised as a COVID as a global event? Has it exercised a change on the process of innovation, helped, or the other way around?
Well, I mean, I think the pandemic broadly has and will have significant effects
Is that an accelerator?
Well, it's an accelerator in some ways, but it's also a cause for slowing down in other ways. Even within, for example, the pharmaceutical industry, of course, in the development of vaccines and diagnostics and other therapeutics for that disease, there's been a massive acceleration because all of the regulatory and other conservative things that would keep things going very, very slowly have been replaced by equally effective regulatory approaches, but where time is valued differently. I mean, the reality is that when you have a regulated industry, for example, the price that people put on lost lives while you're waiting to come up with a solution is relatively low. And instead, there's a price put on the inadvertent safety effect, understandably, but the question is, which is more valuable? In the case of pandemic, when thousands of people started dying a day, then people said, you know what, we need to stop this and do the experiments in parallel. You don't have to wait 6 months between each steps, all of that. That's good. The bad news, ironically, just in pharmaceuticals is that clinical trials of every other disease either slowed down or stopped.
Yeah.
So one of the big burdens that pandemic is going to create, I can tell you, is that it's going to have slowed down the development of drug development, slowed down the clinical process, meaning diseases getting treated in hospitals, because there's been a year and a half of major disruption of what is prioritized, what is not. So these pandemics or these kinds of disruptions always have, they give and they take. And I think there's been equal amounts of each.
Well, I share with you, and I think I agree with you, your description when you were describing about investing in innovation, how does it work? And if I may interpret that, so there's one classical way of doing that when you were describing that there are experts of different ranks and they can come with and advise the society or advise the, scientific society, investor society. So the classical way going from today to the future. While what you were saying that there's this process mostly in this new world is not classical. I like to call it's quantum. So because it's quantum, you don't go from A to B, you go basically where is the future, and then maybe you calculate the probability how to reach there with what are the possible paths. And of course, innovation in one specific sector is not isolated. And the world, and this quantum world or this rapid evolution world, is developing itself not only in biotechnology or pharmaceuticals, but also in artificial intelligence, in IT, in many other sectors. So how do you see, because you are in the middle of all of this, how these things work together? What's the influence of other sectors of development or other innovations on your sector, which is the biotechnology and pharmaceutical?
Yeah, let me answer in two ways. First, I would say that your idea of kind of thinking of it as quantum, in the biological sense, this notion that you can be in multiple places at the same time and essentially have a kind of a probabilistic set of solutions pushed against the problem is the essence of essentially Darwinian evolution. Because Darwinian evolution does not presume the solution. It basically creates a diversity of solutions against any given problem, meaning any survival challenge.
Yeah.
And whatever solution survives is the solution, and you can't know which one it is a priori. So there's this diversification-based, multiple end states-based way to make progress. And in fact, the reason that's important to us is that our entire flagship's entire innovation methodology, which we described very recently in a Harvard Business Review article on the topic of innovation, it's called Emergent Discovery is what we call it, is all based on this notion that you have to create multiple solutions, multiple possible states, and then let them compete for which one ends up being the optimal one. And that is a way to make much more rapid progress than one solution at a time, kind of the human-centric, design-oriented kind of, in the world we live in, humans have become kind of the supreme drivers of the answer, and goal-based design is kind of a valued thing. Nature laughs at goal-based design because the goal keeps shifting. So how could you possibly do goal-based design? So I'd say that is an important shift that's beginning to happen. And of course, related to that is, to answer your question, for example, one of the big technological advances, which is not a breakthrough today, it's one that's been happening for a while, is in fact artificial intelligence and machine learning, which has become more accessible, more affordable, and more powerful than it had been in the past decades. And as a result, it is beginning to disrupt and enable this process. Because if you can calculate 1 million chess moves at once, as opposed to 100 at a time, or you could calculate 15 moves ahead, because of your ability to create models to do this and simplify the search space, you can equally calculate all the different states a string of amino acids could take when it folds into a protein, which means that instead of trying to figure out purely quantum mechanically exactly how all the forces work, you just create all the possible alternatives and let them compete for a objective function. That is a major interface between fields that's totally transforming what we can do. And there's many more examples like that.
Well, what you are saying is quite encouraging for me as well. If you try to understand not only what's happening in mechanical world or the quantum mechanical world, in the biological world, which is basically again quantum mechanical, as you said, because you have to leave all possible options to basically get their way ahead, and the competition or evolution, whatever you call it, will take place. In fact, I think we should have learned that before, because the best way of calculation, even in IT or computer science, is parallel processing rather than having one and after another, the one that humans have behaved. And of course, now these same ideas are going to work not only in quantum mechanics, in biology, artificial intelligence, but most probably also in our social behavior. We have to become too big, and with that, on this small planet, we probably were becoming more natural. So Darwin's theory will start working much more heavier. But my third and last question will be addressing you as a friend and fellow Armenian. You live in diaspora. You are the majority. I live in Armenia. I'm the minority because it's a small state and much bigger diaspora, because the nation is much bigger. So it's a small state, global nation. And we all, well, among our friends, have the vision or a dream to make Armenia as well as one of the centers of innovation, global centers of innovation. Because at the end of the day, that's the only way that I think that our nation and the state can be strong and develop itself and can make a contribution to the world. Because this is not a small state that has huge natural resources or any other ways. But history has proven, and even the recent history, and you are one of the proofs of history that Armenian mind can be very innovative. And it's more than natural to try to make Armenia an innovation hub or a center. So the question remains, so what's the way forward? Is it going to be classical? Or again, we have to think more quantumly to take Armenia from point A we are to the desired point B, which Armenia will be much stronger and indeed one of the centers of innovation. Please, Nubар, what do you think?
Well, look, I think that the smaller you are, the more innovation is your way out by definition. There are many inner cities in America where for many years, the higher you jump, the more athletic you were, the more you could escape the life you were born into. That for us is really innovative and needs to be for a country that finds itself at this level of relative significance. But I think that our biggest challenge, speaking of Summit of Minds, is our mindset. Maybe we should call this Summit of Mindsets, because there we have significant conflict, unfortunately. And of course, the challenge becomes how much, and really has to do with the relationship with the future. Let me just make the following case. When people are suffering in the present, it's human nature that they don't think of the future, even though the solution to the problems of the present are often going to be derived from that future. And unless you make time for the future to somehow intervene with the present, you're stuck in that present. And that's something that over the last 20 years of engaging in development projects within Armenia, I've realized that those two mindsets are unfortunately contradicting. It is natural that by living in the diaspora, Armenians have access to many, many other mindsets, one, and two, aren't suffering the day-to-day difficulties of the country. And therefore, they naturally come from that point of view. The question is, can there be intellectually, socially room made for these mindsets to be able to persist, for these plants to be able to be rooted into that garden? Or does the soil always reject that for understandable reasons that are rooted in suffering and current problems and etc.? And of course, as you well know, I don't want to delve into the world of politics, but people elect governments based on what they can do for them today. Unfortunately, not what they do for them tomorrow. And if the only solutions for today is to focus on those who are only interested in today, it's very hard to imagine.
Although politics is an art of promise.
Well, but unfortunately, it's promise about, it's the unrealistic future, promise about today.
Yeah.
No, but politics is about the art of promise about today, unrealistically. In fact, those promises are much more realistic if you give them some time, but the time usually exceeds the election cycles. So this is something that as Armenians, we have to go back to our thousands of years history and find a way to sit around the table and say, how do we get Armenians from wherever they live to believe in the ideal of a revived Armenia and Armenians, and kind of how do you merge the possibilities that can come from future backwards thinking? And only then do I think innovation becomes a weapon for advancement. Only then can you expect cooperation. And that's the big challenge we all stand in front of.
Well, I fully agree with you that the solution of today's problems is in the future. And in order to basically solve our problems today, we have to be working very hard and targeting ourselves to the future. Otherwise, if we're stuck only in today, we will never do that. Today is more linked to the past rather than to the future. So I agree with you. To sort our issues today, we have to focus on tomorrow, work on tomorrow, develop things for tomorrow. And I also agree with your point that living outside Armenia and living inside Armenia, there are two different mindsets. So you put it very, very elegantly about the mindsets here. Because living outside opens for you a sort of opportunity, different mindsets. And that's why probably when we think about Armenia today, we can think about two models. One is a closed model, wherein the dominance of today inside Armenia is strong, and another model, which is an open model, when we basically utilize, use, or work together with the world, and specifically with the Armenian diaspora. And for that, I mean, practically, as the President of the Republic, I'm working on changing the Constitution, Mr. Afeyan, dear Nubbar. A Constitution change that will allow you as an Armenian that has Armenian passport, any day or a time, if needed, come and serve, and if you are ready, come and serve your country. And bringing together with you not only the knowledge you have, not only the experience that you have, but also your mindset, which is global. This is what the country needs.
Yeah. Well, look, I commend you for that, and I think that's an important step, because not until there is a legal framework that is acknowledging of these deficiencies is this going to be solved. And there are thousands of people like me at various stages that are going to be that are from the same kind of idealistic mindset of wanting a better Armenian state, but are somewhat limited to what they can do. Let me just say one quick thing, because I know we're out of time.
Yes, please.
You know, a lot of this has also to do, and to especially my Armenian colleagues, a lot of this has to do with belief. You know, one of the things I tell people is that major progress is an act, first and foremost, of leaps of faith. And leaps of faith are based on the belief that when you land in that leap, you are in a better place. And that belief, that leap of faith, is fueled by a human capacity to imagine and to believe in what you imagine. If you cannot believe in what you imagine, one, you're in a depressed state, and two, you can't progress. And so one of the interesting things is for a country that is deeply rooted historically in faith, which is itself a religious act, an act of believing in a future, a promise of a future, we have to find it within our history, within our culture, to be able to believe again in a better future. And because that's my biggest worry, is that we have lost our belief in our ability to be in a better place. And without that, imagination shuts down, ability to leap shuts down, and you do incremental things and you stay exactly where you are. That's the biggest, to me, challenge. And the pandemic should make us realize that we need big solutions, not small solutions, to be able to progress.
Well, on that sort of, I would say an optimistic note, because what you are saying is showing a path where we have to go, where we have to believe things, and we have to believe that if we behave quantumly and flying from here to that place is the best place, and this is where we have to be. And we have that capacity. So on that optimistic note, I would like to thank you again, Nubbar, Professor Afeyan, and I wish you all the success, because your success, especially in what you are doing, especially in healthcare and pharmaceutical, today has become the success of not only yours, but also the whole world, and also Armenia as well. Thank you, Nubbar.
Thank you very much for having me.